With food shortages, rising prices, and job insecurity, we were really itching to grow a garden this year. I've mentioned our garden in the past couple of our Real Numbers monthly budget updates and in our quarantine food storage challenge updates, but today I'm going to finally show you the garden. Then next week I'll be starting the new series where I'm helping you get started with food storage. If that's something you're interested in, go ahead and click subscribe and stay tuned for those updates. There were lots of reasons why growing a garden, this year especially, was important to us. We've had a garden for most of our married life, nearly 15 years, besides the past 3 years. When we bought this house just over 3 years ago, we knew we wanted a garden, but it was something that was going to require some serious work. The majority of our property is on a pretty steep slope. We knew that eventually we wanted to terrace part of our property and put in raised beds, but it was going to be a huge undertaking that would require hiring a bulldozer operator for the excavation and then building raised beds. We put off the investment of time and money while we focused on other financial goals. We still grew a little here and there in pots, but nothing as extensive as we've done in the past or we hope to do in the future. But a few months ago we changed our thinking. Now if you got an extra $5,400 out of the blue, what would you do with it? We asked ourselves the same question when we found out that we'd be getting an economic impact check of that amount. There are 2 adults and 6 kids in our family. Our first instinct was to treat it as normal income and put it toward our normal goals, especially since that's about what we stood to lose with our Airbnb vacant over the next few months. In that regard, this wasn't extra money, this was covering our income loss due to the coronavirus. That was partly what this stimulus was intended to do. At the same time, all of this corona craziness and eating from our food storage, we didn't go to the grocery store for 3 months after the shelter-in-place order in California kicked in. It had us thinking about growing as much as we can. We decided that after paying 10% tithing, as we do with all the money we get, the rest would be going toward the garden project. Mike made a spreadsheet to estimate the garden costs. As we brainstormed, we could plug in the numbers for different scenarios, different number of beds, different soils, various building materials, and decide how to best use the funds. We quickly saw that even with the huge stimulus, the full project with an orchard and as many raised beds as we wanted would have to be spread over multiple years, though we could get a really good start this year. We had all the terracing done at once, but we'll only be using parts of 2 terraces this year. So in total we have 5 terraces in addition to the ground level at the bottom. These top 2 terraces will have fruit trees on them, which we'll plant in January or February. The next 3 terraces down have raised beds, or will have raised beds. Our native soil, if you can call it that, is fine for oak trees and weeds, and poison oak thrives, but not really for cultivating vegetables. As you can see, we have rock with some dirt instead of dirt with some rock. At the bottom of the hill, what I'm calling ground level, we'll be planting berries. We planted blackberries and raspberries in several other spots on our property, but we'd like to eventually have it all within our giant fenced garden, which in itself was a huge project, getting that fence up. This year we put a total of 10 4-foot by 8-foot raised beds divided between the first terrace and this is the second terrace. 8 of the raised beds are 12 inches high and 2 of them that are planted with sweet potatoes are 20 inches high. Originally we planned to make them all 20 inches high, but finding the right lumber dimensions was tricky. Lumber for raised beds garden has apparently been flying off the shelf like toilet paper. We may add more height to the others in the future as we rotate crops, but for now it's just fine. We purchased a 12 cubic yard truckload of potting soil mix from a local landscape supplier. At $47 per cubic yard, plus $80 delivery, we spent $680 just on dirt. Having it in raised beds means it will last for a few years. We'll amend it as needed, but this year we're just using it as is. It seems light and lovely, so we'll see how it grows. In the future, I'll share a full garden cost breakdown, but we're still working on the fencing and the gates, which is a major cost for such a large area. It's roughly 10,000 square feet. So I don't have the numbers for you yet, but I'll say that we've exceeded the amount that we received with our stimulus. But if you saw our last budget update, you already know that. We planted lots of different things and we're hoping it all grows. Before we got our big stimulus check and decided to go for the big garden plan, we went ahead and planted what we could. We found a flat spot near a pond on our property, tilled up the grass that was there and planted it with squash like pumpkins, butternut squash, zucchini, banana squash, and spaghetti squash, and some melons, watermelon and cantaloupe. Since the terraced hillside took several weeks to get to the point where we could plant it, we're glad that we got this spot started ahead of time. Even with the head start, we're behind where we could be, but we're still hoping for a good harvest in the coming months. We have another bed that will have cool weather things like lettuce, but it got too hot too fast for it. In addition to the squash, melons, and random other plant starts that needed somewhere to go, we have blackberries and raspberries at several different spots on our property. Eventually, we'll migrate them all over to the main garden, but for now, they're spread out. Hopefully the birds will save some for us. In the terraced garden, we have 3 beds of various tomatoes, 8 plants per raised bed. Before the garden fence was done, about a dozen of the tomato plants were completely devoured by deer. That was a hard blow. Thankfully, we planted loads of tomato seeds back when we first decided that we needed to plant all we could this year. They had been sitting on our back patio, stunted in their tiny pots, but we were grateful to have them to replace what the deer took. If we could only plant one thing, Mike would have it be tomatoes, as homegrown tomatoes are so much better than what you can get at the store. He would have happily filled every bed with tomato plants, but I made him diversify a bit. We have 3 raised beds of sweet potatoes. Each bed has 12 sweet potato plants. The deer took a few, but we were able to replace them with some leftovers that Mike's dad had. We're hoping for a good sweet potato harvest because that's a favorite vegetable around here. We planted some Armenian cucumbers and some other cucumbers that we got from a friend, along with some watermelon and cantaloupe. They haven't really taken off, so we'll see what happens. We dusted everything with some diatomaceous earth to keep the bugs off that keep eating them. We also did a bed with squash so we can see how it compares with our other squash patch that got a head start. It has some yellow squash that we got from a friend, some zucchini, some butternut squash, and some spaghetti squash. We put lots of seeds down and planned to thin them, but right now they're all struggling, so we'll see. We have 1 raised bed dedicated to a 3 sisters garden where we have corn, beans, and pumpkins planted. We planted the corn really close, like this YouTube video that I saw, and have a pumpkin at either end and a banana squash plants on the far side. The plan is to let them vine over the edge and let the beans, which we just barely planted, climb up the corn. The kids are really excited about having corn on the cob, and we all have so much fun watching the corn grow. It just grows so fast. We're really excited about having homegrown fresh produce, especially after doing our quarantine food storage challenge. We can really appreciate how great it will be to have fresh produce to go along with our food storage. Knowing that there will likely be another wave of this COVID-19 pandemic, it'll be really nice to have garden produce to go alongside our food storage. Do you have a garden? I'd love to hear what you're growing. Please share down in the comments, and I'll see you back next week when we start planning your food storage.